Season 1 of Marvel Rivals has changed everything, with massive buffs and nerfs and new heroes that have really changed the entire meta. That's why in this video, we're going to break down all the heroes from S tier all the way to F tier, so you know exactly what the best and worst mains are this season, what characters you should consider learning and maining, and give you a snapshot of the meta as a whole, and give you tips and tricks along the way, so whether you're playing meta, anti-meta, or anything in between, you can still perform better in this season and climb to the highest ranks of play. Now, many of you have been asking for coaching, and I want to introduce you to the Marvel Rivals Academy. Inside the Academy is everything that you need to improve, from consistent coach 12-mans, where both teams will have designated coaches that will review your gameplay and strategy so that you can learn, get better, and incorporate that for your ranked games as well. There's also going to be consistent coaching classes from myself and many other top Rivals coaches that's going to further your game understanding and help you develop your gameplay further, whether you're a new player or someone that is trying to chase the path to pro. There's also a ton more that we're going to offer, but first, there's a special free event this Sunday at 4 p.m. EST. Check out the links down below, join the Discord, and I can't wait to see you there. Now keep in mind, this is going to be for mid to high elo for ranked play specifically, and we're going to start off with the tanks because all metas are formed around what tanks are being played, so let's see exactly where they line up with the current meta. Now first we gotta talk about Venom, and Venom received some pretty crazy buffs. Not only did he get a giant buff in his sustain ability when he goes in, gets a ton of shields, he's gonna be almost impossible to kill, but now his ultimate's a lot more lethal and can be combined with either a teammate or his other abilities to almost one-shot a lot of characters, which is very, very strong, and Venom is gonna fit really well into any mobility-heavy composition. If you have characters that are trying to dive in, characters that are trying to attack from multiple angles, characters that are gonna jump in with you, Venom really starts to shine. And Venom is extremely powerful, especially for solo queue, because I think he's a pretty independent character. He doesn't really rely on a lot of other people. But right now, even though he's very strong, the overarching meta is more poke-centric. Trading damage from range, applying pressure from range, whittling people down, and playing off your ultimates. So in that environment, he doesn't really thrive. He's still a fantastic character, and I really do think that if you're up against him and you're playing non-crowd control comps, like you don't have any stuns or anything like that, you're just never going to kill him. You're never going to kill him at all, and he's super good at contesting a lot of people's setup, like HELAs and HAWKEYEs and things like that. But overall, he's not going to do enough to make him into the highest tier, but he still is going to be a consistent performer, and I do want to put him in the A tier. So very strong, but not quite the best of the best. Now, speaking of which, we do have Thor, and a lot of you really enjoyed my Thor guide. If you want to know a lot about Thor, I would definitely suggest checking it out, but Thor is crazy strong. I think he's even more powerful in the lower elos as you start to climb more and more. He can really carry you all the way to the top percentile of play because Thor has a lot going for him. Not only is he extremely mobile, but he also has really high burst damage, and he can bully a lot of other tanks, specifically tanks like Doctor Strange and Magneto. He can move them around, push them into his team, kind of displace them where he wants to, and that's really great. Not to mention, he has great synergy with Captain America, who got a buff, and Storm, who's freaking insane this season. We'll get to that a little bit later. And yeah, he also is really good with HELA. He gets to just come back alive when HELA gets a kill. Spoiler alert, HELA is still very powerful this season, so the synergy there works well. And yeah, Thor can potentially be the hardest carry in the lobby, but there's a couple of problems with Thor. Number one, when you're playing Thor, you're also, once again, not playing that trade poke thing that's happening right now where you really want your tanks to be survivable, really hard to punish, and Thor can be punished. He's really vulnerable to crowd control. He doesn't have mitigation or shields to protect him. And in addition to that, he's not a great solo tank. So he's going to lose some points in that regard, especially for ranked play, where it's going to be very hard for you to frontline on this character. Once again, he doesn't have a way to actually protect himself, and yeah, that really is going to hurt him quite a bit. So I think he can carry really high, and there are some maps like Future Tokyo where he can just rooftop ride and kind of dominate that map, and in the right composition, he's going to be the hardest carry, but in a lot of situations, he does fall behind, so you got to pick and choose. I don't think you can necessarily one-trick Thor past a certain rank, but he is still extremely, extremely strong if you build those synergies into place. So yeah, I'm going to put him in the A tier. I think he's a very reasonable character, very, very strong, and can definitely carry games very hard, maybe harder than anyone else. Oh, also, his crowd control resistance now is really nice. In his ultimate got canceled by everything before, and now it doesn't, so that's really, really cool. But I would highly recommend checking out the Thor guide if you haven't seen it. If you want to have like another pocket pick to learn and to play and to carry with, Thor is, in my opinion, the easiest way to get all the way to plat as a tank. Just play Thor, carry games. Now, Doctor Strange receiving a couple of nerfs to his shield regeneration, to his burst close range damage, and yeah, it just doesn't matter. Doctor Strange is still the best tank in the game. He's incredibly powerful. His ultimate is a top 5 ultimate. His teleporter is basically like an ultimate. It's so powerful how teleporter works. And here's the thing. Here's the weird thing about teleporter that I think a lot of people are doing wrong, but sometimes it works. So one of the things a lot of people do is they walk in a spawn, they instantly teleport. They put themselves in a position to surprise the enemy team. You know, they put them behind the enemy team, they take a high ground, whatever, right? And this works a lot of the time, even though it shouldn't. And the reason that this works is because people get completely surprised. They're not ready for it. And then they just get blown up and killed. You get a free pick and you take the point, right? And that seems like it makes sense. But against better and better opponents, that's not going to work. And then you wasted your teleporter when you could have just walked up, taken a strong position, and then had teleporter to potentially get back to the fight faster in a close fight. Because if, you know, you trade out and you're down to 2-2, imagine you trade out a lot, you're down 2-2, and then all of a sudden your Strange can porter you back in, and then y'all can just refight that fight and just win it. So that's how strong it is. But, you know, the reality of it is, in some ranks, depending on, like, how good your opponents are, they're just not going to react to a TP and you're going to win free fights. I think it's an example about how doing the objectively wrong thing or high-level wrong thing can actually still work. So I would say that just keep that in mind as you start to get better and climb. Try to think about what TP does for you and your team. What does it create? How could you potentially waste it and not get a lot of value? It's a very long cooldown, so yeah. Now, Captain America is someone that did get buffed quite a bit, and Captain America is a fair bit stronger than he was before, but he's still not amazing. I think Cap needs a couple of things to make him work, and the big problem with Cap right now still is he doesn't do any damage. He has very little overall damage, and he is a little bit awkward still compared to some of his other diver counterparts. I think he can be really good in the hands of a very experienced Cap player with the right synergy around him. You know, someone that's going to really utilize his offensive pressure to apply that damage. He's good with the Thor synergy. He's good with the Thor Storm synergy. He's really good at being this tank that's very hard to kill, but sometimes just being hard to kill isn't enough. Not to mention there's so many other tank ults right now, from Strange to Magneto to Groot, that are very powerful and can win fights. Caps is just making him more difficult to kill. I mean, it helps his team as well, but most of the time it's not going to be a definitive fight ender like any of these other ults are. And yeah, I don't think that Cap is bad by any metric, but he's not dominant right now. And unfortunately, similar to Thor and Venom, he doesn't really fit a dive-oriented play at the highest levels of play, where it's a lot about trading resources and keeping yourself alive. Cap can keep himself alive, but he can't really trade resources from range. He can't help poke compositions that want to deal damage from range. I'm not saying he's a bad character. He's actually very reasonable and he's very strong, but he's not going to be among the most dominant characters in the meta, but he is a nice supplemental option. And yeah, I'm actually going to put him in the B tier relative to that. Now, next, we got to talk about MAGNETO. And this character has gotten a lot going for him going into the season. Even though he didn't get any direct buffs, there's a lot that benefits him in this season over previous seasons. Number one, we'll talk about it later. Wolverine's a menace. Magneto is probably the best tank to deal with Wolverine. He can protect himself really, really well. He can stun him away. He can bubble himself. That's fantastic. So that is just going for him right away. He synergizes really well with Doctor Strange, just being a tank that can just poke out on the front line, trade more resources. Y'all could cycle in and out of front lines with your barrier. And that's amazing because you're just kind of putting so much forward pressure that's really hard for enemies to ever get an angle on. Magneto can poke off anglers. You poke out a DPS that's trying to take like a mini angle or flank on your team. You poke them away. You're really intimidating in your presence, not to mention that you can bubble a lot of people that are going in, whether you're bubbling in a Panther, whether you're bubbling in a Thor, whatever you're bubbling in, they're going to get a lot of value. You're going to get a lot of value. You're going to get more CC, crowd control, right clicks back. And I also just can't stress enough how strong his ultimate is in this meta. There's a lot of support stacking going on right now. There's a lot of Cloak and Dagger combined with Loki, combined with Luna Snow, and just like cycling ults and ults and ults. And having an ultimate that can just be like, nah, I'm just going to kill things. I'm just going to kill you through your ultimate. I'm going to shut that down. could also be a counter ultimate to things like Star-Lord ultimate as well. It's just great. It's a really, really great character all in all. There's not really much core weaknesses to this character. And yeah, I just think he's an amazing character to pick right now. And if you're looking for one tank to play, I think that Strange probably requires more specialization and expertise. Magneto is my pick for the best flex tank. If you're someone that's not a tank player, but you're looking for a tank that's always going to be good, even if you're solo tanking, even if they're playing a Wolverine, no matter what the enemy's on, I think Magneto is always good, and he's not that difficult to pick up and get a lot of value from. So yeah, I'm gonna put him in the S tier. Watashi wa GROOT. We gotta talk about GROOT. GROOT is amazing. He's really good in this season, and we're seeing a lot of triple support compositions where it's one ult after the next after the X. A lot of support ultimates, right? And the fact that Groot's ult can not only chain crowd control people, but you combine it with like a Namor ult or a Moon Knight ult, and you can kill people through these defensive ultimates. I mean, having that is fantastic, and GROOT is also just a character that provides a lot of frontline pressure, has a ton of carry potential. Honestly, he's deceptively a character that can actually carry really hard in the right hands. I think while a Magneto, there are more subtle differences between like an amazing Magneto and a good Magneto. There is a massive difference between an amazing GROOT and a decent GROOT, because GROOT just has a lot of skill expression. There's a lot of things that good GROOTs can do, like blocking off people from exiting, finding walls that can deny heals at a certain moment, denying ults with their walls. There's a lot. Like, GROOT is really, really strong. I would say there's a couple of things that really hold GROOT back, though. Number one, he isn't the best at keeping himself alive relative to, like, Doctor Strange and Magneto. If he gets pulled in by a Winter Soldier, if he gets pulled in by a Wolverine, he's just gonna die. Like, that's it. He's just gonna die. He can't keep himself alive through those like these other characters can. So while he is a frontline tank, he is more prone to being targeted than these other characters are. So that's a little bit of a mark against him, but still, great character. I'm actually going to put him at the very top of A tier as a very, very solid pick, and a character that I am going to work on learning coming this season. Now, next up is Banner, and Banner is still incredible. As a lot of people kind of found out later in the season, originally, a lot of people were sleeping on Banner, didn't really kind of understand how good he was, myself included, but as people got better and better with the character, we realized the potential, and then we also realized the potential with the synergy. The Hulk Iron Man synergy became extremely strong, even in pro play. In pretty much all ranks, you could run this synergy and just dominate. And on top of that, I think Banner is just a character that can carry by himself. Really good banners can hard carry games. It doesn't really matter, Iron Man or no Iron Man, it doesn't matter at all. This character is the best diver. He also can mark players, and by mark, I mean run around, chase them down, shut them down. It doesn't really matter what you are. You could get completely demolished by a freaking Banner just chasing you down. He has some of the highest carry potential in the game, and that's a lot going for him. That's really a lot. I do understand that he did receive some nerfs going into Season 1. Not enough to really matter, to be honest. He's still just freaking fantastic, and he's also going to be one of the most banned characters at high elos to play. So if you want to learn him, I highly recommend you do, but also consider learning other characters as well, because you're going to get really hard targeted. I think it's interesting how even though Strange and Magneto are so strong, they're not hard targeted like Banner is. Maybe it's because people really hate dealing with the synergy, but it's also just a testament to how strong Banner is as well. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Penny Parker. And Penny is a great tank, but she's a situationally great tank. I go over this a lot. A lot of people disagree with me and argue with me on this point, but I want you to listen to what I have to say about Penny before you make up your mind. Penny is a character that can be played in a lot of different situations. She has reasonable mobility. She has good stun. And I think that in a lot of these situations, you can make her work and you get a lot of value with her. However, when we talk about what is seeing a lot of play in the meta, which is typically the trading of a lot of resources on the front line, sometimes it's diving in with Banner and, you know, taking a lot of angles, but most of the time it's playing these front lines, trading a lot of resources. Penny can do that sometimes, but has some trouble in other situations. She can't do it solo, especially on attack. She's going to have a lot of problems trying to push forward and actually create advantage and space for your team. Now, as we're talking about the lower elos of play, typically all the way up until like the mid to high or the high, Pennies can get away with this because a lot of people will actually play into your utility, make a lot of mistakes, allow you to take space that you shouldn't be able to take space, and you're going to slowly kind of choke out teams, right? But really, as you start to play higher and higher elo, you see some of the core weaknesses of what PENI doesn't do, which is be able to push extremely aggressively when you have advantage. You know, a Magneto and a Strange are pushing, closing out, squeezing the enemy team. Groot is squeezing the enemy team, pushing through chokes, forcing their team through, creating that space. PENI can't do that to the same level. However, when we talk about defense and spaces that you're holding, enemy teams have a really hard time doing that against you. So that's kind of the double-edged sword, where you're not as good as these other options at doing that, but your existing makes it harder for enemy teams to do that against you. So I think PENI is a great tank, but not necessarily one I would suggest one-tricking. Maybe in the lower to mid-elos of play, you could definitely do that. PENI does have a really high win rate in the low to mid-elos of play, but once you get to the higher and higher levels of play, that's where I think PENI is a character that you can have in your hero pool as a tank that you play a lot, but maybe not the only tank you play. I still think she's really strong, though, and I think it's kind of hard to place her relative to the other tanks. I want to put her in top of B tier. I also do think that every single tank is viable here, so that's why nothing is in the C or D tier. These characters are still very, very strong in the right situations, so I don't want you to think that I'm disregarding these characters or thinking they're not meta or possible to be meta in the right maps with the right team comps, but she just isn't quite as flexible as some of the higher tier characters to justify a higher placement, but she's still really good. Now that we got the tanks out of the way, let's actually place the DPS characters. What are the best and worst DPS right now in this meta? Starting off with Iron Man, of course. And yeah, Iron Man is going to have to be an A tier. A very powerful character that is basically super, super strong, but not always to the level that he's the first layer of bans. Typically, Banner will get targeted, and it kind of hits them both. But Iron Man is a character that a lot of people kind of realized, especially with the Banner synergy, just applies a lot of pressure. And with all this ult stacking, he's really good as a response to ult stacking. You get to ult enemy teams, you get to ult support ults and just kill them. He's very good. He's very strong, but also a character that you can't one-trick because he's going to get banned past a certain rank. Now, if you're in some of the lower elos of play, you could definitely duo Iron Man, freaking Hulk, and just really go to town on a lot of players. So that's pretty strong. Punish a lot of support ulting, and that's really great. But not enough to push him into the highest tiers of play, but still a very respectable, strong meta staple. The next DPS is Black Panther. Black Panther is a character that did receive a pretty sizable nerf going into Season 1. He was very strong before, and he still is strong, but there are going to be some moments where he's going to have a hard time getting value. He's really going to have a hard time getting value against some of the burst healing that exists, especially in some of these triple DPS, especially in some of these triple support compositions. Not to mention there's a lot of crowd control that can just shut you down. But I really do think that the biggest problem for him, specifically, sometimes characters like PENI could be a problem, but more than that, the NAMOR synergy is just a nightmare for Black Panther, because you can't deal with any of the squids. You can't kill the squids alone. You need your teammates to do it for you. That could be really, really hard for you to do. Not to mention, there are a lot of flying characters, you know, characters like Iron Man, characters like Storm, you can't really interact with, which doesn't mean you lose. You just have to go really hard on their backline, but you can definitely be marked, shot, and interrupted during your cycles. I think if you're going to play Black Panther, there are going to be some games where you're just going to stomp, but there are going to be other games that unless you have a specific team enabling you, you're going to have a really, really hard time doing anything. And that's why I wouldn't recommend Black Panther as your one trick this season, but I do think he's very reasonably powerful. It's just one of those characters that, you know, if they don't have an answer to you, you're just going to pop off, but there are a lot of strong answers to you, so they could shut you down. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. HELA. She got an HP nerf. She got a damage reduction nerf. So, yeah, what exactly is HELA placed? I'm going to tell you right now, she's still S tier. And this one might be a little bit controversial, but here's the thing. HELA was S tier in the previous season, right? And she's undoubtedly way weaker than she was in the previous season now. So how is she still S tier? Well, it turns out HELA was like quadruple S tier, and now she's just normal S tier. Like, she's not the strongest character in the game, but she's definitely one of the strongest characters in the game. And also, the meta has kind of moved to a lot of these characters that are pretty hard to deal with. Characters like Storm, characters like Iron Man. HELA is one of the best characters to deal with these, especially as you go up against better and better Storms and Iron Mans. The amount of time they peek out of cover is very brief. They're not out of cover very long. And what that means is you need burst damage more than you need consistent damage. So someone like Punisher might make sense, and he's not bad by any means, but he's not bursting down nearly as much. So if you have good aim, you still have a means to shut down a lot of these flying characters. Your ultimate is still very, very good. And as you'll see, I didn't even mention this with a lot of tanks. Ultimates are a big deal. And when you have an ultimate like, you know, Penny Parker's ultimate, and you compare it to an ultimate like Doctor Strange's ultimate, that's a big deal. And when you have an ult like HELA's ultimate, you're like, that's an amazing ultimate. And you compare it to a random other ultimate like maybe Iron Fist ultimate, it doesn't really stack up the same. Like, ultimates are a really, really big deal. HELA still has a fantastic ultimate. She still is one of the best ways to counter many of the other meta characters or, you know, A-tier characters. And she synergizes still very well with Loki, very well with Thor, bringing them both back alive with a single kill. Yeah, not much to say besides that. HELA is still S-tier. Hawkeye, let's talk about him. So Hawkeye also receives some nerfs. It's harder to charge his bow, but overall Hawkeye is still the same character, very similar. It's just going to have slightly less uptime, but I also think people have gotten better at dealing with Hawkeye in general. They've kind of realized there's a lot of counters, especially in the tanking and DPS category. There are a lot of counters to Hawkeye that can shut him down, can put pressure on him, can either dive him directly or punish him for trying to be aggressive with some of these angles. And he doesn't have great mobility, so he actually is fairly easy to punish. But something about him is he's going to be overly banned in general because support players don't have almost any agency to him. Like, almost none of the supports can do anything about a Hawkeye, and he's also a character that punishes supports the most. So he's actually really good against some of these triple support compositions, and he's going to get banned a lot by supports that just basically die for just playing the game. Like, he's a very frustrating character to play against in general, but especially if you're playing support, what do you do about a Hawkeye? You can't dive him necessarily unless you're playing like a psycho and just deal with him yourself. So you're just gonna ban him most of the time if you can. So I think it's gonna be overbanned, like relative to how strong he is. He's still strong, by the way, but he's gonna be one of the most banned characters, even if he might not be or isn't the strongest DPS. He's still good though. I'm gonna give him an A-tier placement. Still really good, can counter a lot of these triple support comps, but it's not gonna be like the strongest character in the game. He does have some really huge weaknesses still, and he doesn't really play that well until a lot of this flying characters that are seeing play too. So yeah, I'm putting him in the A tier. Now we got to talk about Iron freaking Fist. And yeah, Iron Fist is rough. Like, he's really rough. There are some key problems with this character. I think mainly the biggest problem with him is that his time to kill is extremely low. And as players get better and better, there's just a lot of ways to shut him down. He really, like, loses to teamwork. The power of friendship is what he loses to. Because if you're fighting him, if he's on one person and someone else is shooting him in the back, someone else is healing the person he's on, that person's just not going to die. They're going to be able to kill him pretty easily. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely play him at a high level. There are a very few amount of freaking Iron Fist that are doing well in the high elos of play, but yeah, for the most part, they're not. Like, Iron Fist is a character that you have to do a lot to get very little from, and I don't think he's necessarily unplayable. And especially if we talk about the lower to mid elos, he can dominate lobbies, being able to deflect literally anything from crowd control to ultimates to whatever. But yeah, he definitely lags behind. His ultimate's, like, it's okay. Like, it's actually pretty powerful for a transform ultimate, but it's just okay compared to, like, you know, some of the ultimates that just are, you know, checkmate ultimates, I win ultimates. I don't think he's unplayable, though. I'm going to put him in the C tier. He's pretty bad, but there are moments where he can shine. Now, Black Widow, on the other hand, I'm putting in D tier. They gave this character massive buffs, and it just doesn't really matter for this character's overall kit. You can't kill anything with your one-shot. You're not going to be mobile enough to get away from dive characters. You're not good from range, even though you have all these, like, you're not good from close range, even though you have all these close range options. There's just a lot that is kind of working against you here. Now, once again, I run into this problem with this character where it's like, if she doesn't have a one-shot, she's very weak. But if she gets a one-shot, she's probably overpowered. So, yeah, I don't really know exactly what they're going to do with her going forward. They could change up parts of her kit, but I still am in the camp of completely reworking this character. Give her a goddamn BR from Halo or something like that. Make her a mid-range threat or maybe even a close-range threat because, yeah, this doesn't really seem like a character that I could see being healthy in Marvel Rivals. But, yeah, overall, she's pretty weak, and she's going to still stay weak. Doesn't mean you can't win games with her. Doesn't mean you can't climb to the top 1% of play. There are still a couple of freaking probably stubborn Black Widow players that are locking her and climbing to the highest ranks of play. Would they be so much higher if they just locked HELA? Yeah. Would they be, would they have a much easier time if they did? Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't climb with this character. And yeah, so I'm just going to place her in D tier. And I think she's probably the weakest DPS in the game. So yeah. Mr. Freaking Fantastic. Now, I had a really long call with the Rank 1 Wolverine team captain about Mr. Fantastic. And him and I debated about Mr. Fantastic. Because here, this is the thing that is weird about Mr. Fantastic. He's not a DPS, not really. And the reason is because he doesn't fit any of the molds of a normal DPS. He doesn't have long distance poke, and he doesn't have hyper mobility, which is pretty much every DPS besides a couple. I think you could say that, you know, maybe Winter Soldier is another character that doesn't have... I know you can, like, do damage from range, but you're not doing really targeted damage from range because of the projectile, how slow it is. So, you know, Mr. Fantastic is kind of like this brawly, close-range threat that doesn't fit on these, like, hyper-mobility comps that, like, a PSYLOCKE and a STAR-LORD can play any position and just kind of exist there, and a NAMOR and a HAWKEYE are just spamming from range. He doesn't do either of those things. He doesn't spam from range. He's pretty close-ranged. He doesn't dive, like, jump in, and he can't play on angles and flanks and things like that. I know he has a little bit of mobility, but it's not hyper-mobility, like, you know, Black Panther, Iron Fist, PSYLOCKE, STAR-LORD. But in the tanking category is where he kind of shines. I think there are going to be some worlds where, you know, a Wolverine's dominating your team, and, you know, you play a frontline tank, and then you cycle in with Mr. Fantastic. Really good cycling, and I think also, like, a good duo synergy is GROOT and Mr. Fantastic. Being able to play around your walls, constantly having your uptime, being just almost impossible to kill, and being a dive, you know, destroy. You just shut down anyone that comes in close. You just punish anyone that comes in close. Now, I think that this playstyle is going to be optimized further, and he's probably going to get to a point where he's reasonable. But still, there's a big problem with the character. Even in spite of all these positive things I said about this character, like the potential for him to play as a second tank in a triple DPS composition, I think that's actually pretty strong. I think that in that category, he can actually work as an anti-dive threat. The big problem and the elephant in the room is his ultimate. Like, you gotta think about ultimate power level in this meta over any other meta, because there are so many ultimates that the games are going to be around. There's so many powerful ultimates. All these defensive stacking support ultimates are super strong. If you have an ultimate that doesn't even need a defensive support ult in response to it, it's going to be pretty bad. And an ultimate that if you combo, like you could combo this with a GROOT ult and you're still not killing anything. It's so much weaker than like any other ult. I actually literally think it's the weakest ult in the game. It really should scale heavily with, you know, damage. As every bounce, it goes up and more. Like, it does scale, but it should scale a lot stronger and harder because, yeah, you're basically going to be unkillable. This threat on the front line that is constantly helping your team, peeling for your team, denying enemy plays. And what? You're building up to what? What are you building up to? Like, you're existing and you're not dying, but you're not making any plays. You're not doing anything. And then you build up your ultimate that doesn't do anything. It's a problem. It's a problem. I think this character still has potential, though. I just really do think that in the mid-season patch, or maybe sooner than that, a buff to its ultimate would really make him a lot better in this meta. Because more than any other season, or so far, I know there's only 2 seasons, but ultimate power level matters so freaking much for whether or not a character is played or not played. And yeah, I'm going to put him in the top of C tier. I think you could make an argument for B tier. Yeah, but this is where I'm going to place him. Speaking of B tier, we have MAGIK. MAGIK did receive a form buff this season, and yeah, I think MAGIK is actually just really good. I'm going to slap her right in the B tier right away. Really good in ranked play, can just kind of carry an entire lobby. Really, with all the combos, dominating the lobby, creating a lot of momentum, has a crazy amount of outplay potential. And, of course, she turns on synergy with PSYLOCKE and Black Panther. Especially Black Panther, it dramatically changes how Black Panther is played because Black Panther can kind of all int over and over again and still be able to get out, which is just great. Yeah, and with the buff to her form, she is more consistent in her form. So MAGIK is a great character. The only reason that she's in B tier is because she doesn't necessarily fit the overarching meta that is seeing a lot of play. She doesn't do a lot from range. She doesn't poke a lot from range. And she can't really contest flanks in the same way that like a STAR-LORD can, a PSYLOCKE can. One of the biggest complaints a lot of MAGIK players have, and it's actually something that is holding her back, is the fact that it's hard to challenge vertically on the fly, right? PSYLOCKE can dash up to a vertical really easily. STAR-LORD can fly up there. But Magic can't really. I mean, you have to invest your dash to get up to the high ground, but then when you're there, you need a dash to kill anyone once you're up there. Like, it's a little bit awkward, right? And I'm not saying the character is unplayable or bad or anything like that. It's just in the way that the meta is played, where you need a hyper mobility threat to be able to contest a lot of these weird vertical angles, or you need a consistent person that does a lot of consistent damage from your back line, behind your front line, behind your Magneto, behind your Strange. She can't really do either of those things, so she's going to be really dominant in ranked and for the synergy, but outside of that, I don't really see how she places in the meta. That being said, in a lot of these dive-centric compositions, like if you're playing a Banner, you're playing a Venom, you're playing Cap Thor, I think that she can find enough space in there and find enough places that she can insert herself with giant bursts of damage that she's just going to be a hard carry. So she's a very good character. She's a very good character, but not the highest tier in the tier list for sure. Next up on the list is Moon Knight. Moon Knight is just so freaking strong this season. It's crazy. He was already strong in the previous seasons, but we talked again about just trading of damages and being able to just be in your backline, constantly trading damages and applying pressure to the enemy team. And when both teams are playing like Groot Strange or Magneto Strange and like these slow compositions that are just trading damage, Moon Knight does it just about better than anyone else. He's going to apply so much just residual damage to the enemy team, and he's going to build his ultimates up really, really fast, which turns out these ultimates are just completely busted because they can actually kill through support ultimates. If you combine them with pretty much anything, they're going to kill. You combine them with Groot, they're going to kill. Moon Knight's fantastic. Like, he's so freaking strong this season that I think he's probably one of the best characters that you could be playing in like all ranks. Like, if you're playing in low elo, Moon Knight gets even better and better. People aren't shooting onks, you know, you're just gonna farm people up, get a lot of kills. And even in high elo, he's just one of those characters that, like, as the fight goes on, he's getting so much damage output, getting these ultimates that can literally just win the fights by themselves. Like, if he places them right, supports can't just ult in response, right? With a lot of ultimates, you know, if PSYLOCKE pops their ult, they're like, okay, I'm going to ult in response. If you ult in response to Moon Knight, you die. Like, that's it. I really think the only thing holding Moon Knight from being, like, crazy strong is that his synergy isn't that good. His synergy with Cloak and Dagger, while Cloak and Dagger's good and he is good, it's just not the biggest deal in the world compared to, like, you know, the HELA THOR synergy, compared to the Hulk Iron Man Thin synergy. Synergies are a really big deal as well in this season. And yeah, his synergy is just okay. Like, it's fine. It's free value for sure. But if he had a really busted synergy, he would just be crazy strong, like even more than he already is. And he's already insane. So I'm putting him in the A tier. I think so far he's like actually the best A tier character I put in the A tier. He's a really great character to pick up right now, and one of those characters that I think slips under the radar. But if you can become a specialist of this character, you're just gonna haunt everyone all the way and, you know, steal all their elo. It's gonna be great. So yeah, PSYLOKKE. So yeah, she did receive a rather big nerf to her ultimate because now it's gonna target barriers and things like that. But it just doesn't change the overall strength of this character, which is pretty freaking strong. We talked about that hypermobility thing where you can just play pretty much any position and just, it's really hard to flush you from that position. You can go invisible, you can dash away. If anyone wants to force the 1v1 with you, they could just die. You can play the assassinate playstyle if you want to, you know, go assassinate targets in the backline. I think that's really strong in a lot of ranked matches. But at the highest elos of play, most of the time, you're just playing this character to really heavily pressure tanks down. Her hit scan fire is actually a lot of damage, and her ultimate is one of those checkmate ultimates that just requires a response, a defensive ultimate, or else people just die to it. Even with the changes, if you just get supports isolated, they still have to pop it. So yeah, PSYLOKKE overall is just great. She's also great at contesting characters like Storm, like Iron Man. You wouldn't think she is, but she actually is. She could take these high ground positions, really poke them out. She's just so good. Like, there's so much about her that's just so good, and she's probably going to consistently be good for a very long time. And the thing about her is, whether you're playing something that's more dive, mobility-oriented, with the Venom, with the Cap, with the Thor, or you're playing just the traditional, I'm just going to poke on the front line with Strange and Magneto, or Groot, she's good in both the situations. Like, she doesn't have a bad situation. So yeah, I'm putting her as, so far on the list, the best DPS. She's just that good. Now, next up is Star-Lord. And this is where things get a little tricky. And this is where the DPS category gets really stacked because there is a lot of viable DPS right now. DPS that I think all of them are very, very good. Star-Lord included. Star-Lord is very freaking good. He not only has an amazing synergy with Adam Warlock, another great character, but he's just one of the best characters at contesting a lot of what is seeing play. He can contest Helas, he can freaking contest Storms, he can contest IRONMAN. Just in the way that he lines up with the meta, he just lines up really, really well. He has a lot of outplay potential with his invulnerability frames, with his flip. He has one of those checkmate ultimates that I like to talk about, where it's just, if opponents don't have a direct answer to it, he kills everybody. And he also plays really well, whether you're playing, you know, if you're playing one of the slower compositions, he's taking these off angles, he's building up his ultimate charge, he's contesting the angles so characters can't get an angle on his team. If he's playing with a mobility comp, he could be hyper aggressive, help dive in with his team, create a lot of momentum that way. So he just works in all these different situations, and I just really can't justify putting him any other place besides S. The more I think about this character, the more I think about his potential, the more I want to put him in S, because he's just that freaking good. He's just that freaking strong. So yeah, just plays really well against all the other meta characters and has a very high skill ceiling, doesn't have a bad situation to play him in, and has a great synergy. Those are all the check marks that you need as a DPS right now. Speaking of which, we have Storm. Now, I waited for doing this tier list. I delayed this tier list a bit. I had a pretty good idea about the entire meta besides her, and as I got to see her more and more in action, got to watch more high-ranked play, got to analyze a lot more games, she's crazy. She's so nuts, and she has a very high win rate in this season, and I'm gonna put her in the S tier. Now, the thing about Storm, they just buffed like everything about her, so she's just very efficient in her damage. I think people didn't quite realize just how strong her ultimate was before, because the rest of her was so bad or just not good enough to see play. But this ultimate is crazy. Like, it's so freaking strong. It's Shark ultimate that just kills you instead, demands a support ultimate, and in ranked play, you just force out a support ultimate, and then you just win the game for free with this, or, you know, you bait out support ultimates with it, and then you just get to win the fight afterwards with whatever other ultimate you have. It's another one of those, guess what, checkmate ultimates. As you could see, Storm, PSYLOCKE, Star-Lord, and HELA, all the S tier characters, had these ultimates that are like, do they have something to counter this? Yes, then you know, they can live. If they don't, no, they lose the fight, right? Storm is just crazy, and I think a lot of these games are going to be based around how you deal with Storm. Having a Storm on the enemy team that's dominating, and then not doing anything to shut it down, not anything to stop it, is gonna be pretty rough. Like, Storm needs some form of contestation, and there's a lot of characters that could do so. PSYLOCKE, Star-Lord, HELA, so other characters in the S tier. You know, IRONMAN can do it very well as well. Characters like NAMOR can do it particularly well. Punisher can do it to an extent as well. So there are ways to contest her, but an uncontested Storm will undoubtedly just roll over your entire team. And yeah, she's just so freaking good. Maybe too good. Maybe deserving of a nerf. I don't know. But she's so strong. So freaking strong. And she's good in all kinds of compositions. Whether you're just trading with shields, whether you're diving in and being more mobile, doesn't matter. She's freaking good. Yeah, and you can even run, you know, some trio synergy with Thor, Cap, Storm if you want to, and just run it down. There's a lot you could do with this character. She's super strong, and definitely a top 4 DPS. Very arguably the best DPS. Now, next up is NAMOR, and I know that the S tier is just so stacked, right? It's so freaking stacked, but once again, I'm putting another character in S tier. I'm putting NAMOR in S tier. But this one has a little bit of a caveat where NAMOR specifically wants the synergy more than anything. He really wants the synergy. Luna Snow is a character that is also super strong, as we'll see in a second, but his presence really denies a lot of the roster. We'll talk about Wolverine a little bit too. He denies that. He denies a lot of divers like Black Panther. He's reasonably good against characters like Storm because you can actually freaking hit her, and with a lot of damage too. Characters like PSYLOCKE, he's pretty good against. Characters like Star-Lord, he's good against. He actually can win the head-to-head against a HELA now because of the damage changes. Now I think he has a, you know, before he was a dog in the matchup, not really anymore. I think it's more like 50-50. There's a lot he does. There's a lot he does great. There's a lot he does really strong. It's just when you don't have that synergy, now you start to see some of the cracks. I still think he's playable without the synergy, especially in ranked play, and you could still carry on this character. But yeah, with that synergy, especially with that synergy buff at the start of Season 1, he's a freaking menace. Like, he's so good. Yeah, so I know that there are 5 DPS in S tier. Five freaking S tier DPS. They're all good. They're all good in their own right, and they're all good because they either have very powerful ultimates. I think Namor is probably the weakest of all these ultimates, but it's also really good at comboing very well. You know, comboing with Groot. He also generates it really fast. But they're all here because they're either consistently good or they have game against the other DPS that are consistently good in a way that other DPS don't, right? Like, I would put Moon Knight up here. Like, Moon Knight is very strong, too. Like, there are so many good DPS this season, guys. Moon Knight's very strong, too, but his game against some of these other DPS isn't that much. Like, he gets a lot of value from poking at the enemy tanks, the enemy backline, but he doesn't really have great one-on-one matchups or isolated matchups against any of the top row. And that means that if there's a really dominant one of those characters in the game, you're not going to be able to directly deal with that. You can be a threat and apply more pressure, but you can't be an answer. You can't be someone that shuts that down. And in fact, you could be shut down by these characters. So I'm not saying that Moon Knight's bad. I'm just saying that that is kind of the requirement to be an S tier right now, is being able to contest these really difficult to contest characters. So yeah, S tier, really freaking stacked. And yeah, so now we're gonna talk about Punisher. Punisher got a buff. With the Rocket synergy, he's really strong. Rocket's also really good this season as well. And he's a character that just outputs a lot of consistent damage. There are some ways that he kind of lacks, I think, especially as you get to, like, the highest tiers where, you know, he can be dove. He doesn't really contest things all that well. His damage is a little too slow. But in like, the mid-tier to the low tier, his turret's going to get a crazy amount of value. He's actually just really good with the Rocket synergy, just burning tanks on the front line, burning Strange's utility, burning Magneto bubble, like just burning all this utility on the front line is great. And yeah, I think he's a reasonable character. He's reasonably strong. He's pretty much like always going to be like fine in any game you play him in. But there are some core weaknesses. He gets outranged by, you know, HAWKEYE, HELA. Even Namor can outrange him. He can get dove. You know, he has a hard time even bursting down some of these flyers. So not like the best of the best, but he's still reasonable. I would put him at the very bottom of A tier or maybe the top of B, one of the two. Scarlet Witch. Yeah, Scarlet Witch is I'm gonna put her in the C tier. I think she's actually better than Black Widow. And she does turn on the Magneto synergy, which is a lot stronger this season. But yeah, she just is just a little too weak at everything. I know she got quite a bit of buffs, but her movement speed is too slow. She's too easy to punish. She's a character that kind of loses to good aim and good reaction time. She can get a lot of value in the lower elos of play, but once you get to the highest elos of play or the higher elos of play, she really starts to get punished more and more, and her windows of opportunity are less and less. Her ultimate is like a checkmate ultimate, but also is one of the hardest to pull off and very ineffective the majority of the time. Like, it's a checkmate ultimate in theory, but like compared to a Storm ultimate, compared to a Starlet ultimate, compared to a HELA ultimate, compared to a PSYLOKKE ultimate, like, you can't compare it to these ultimates at all when we talk about these kind of ultimates. Like, it's not even close. Yeah, she just lags behind. I think if they wanted to make this character viable, they would have to massively buff the movement speed in her fade. But I'm not sure if that's healthy for the game, because then she'd probably just like take over ranked, ruin the game for low elos of play. So I don't know. I don't know where to put her. I don't know how to change her. But yeah, she's fairly weak. Spider-Man. Oh, this character is also particularly weak. I'm gonna put him here, and I'm actually gonna put Mr. Fantastic up a tier. Now that I look at it more clearly, I don't think he deserves to be in with the RAF. And make no mistake, Spider-Man is the RAF. So Spider-Man is a character that lost power going into season 1 because some of his techs got removed. His like special techs, animation cancel stuff got removed. And in addition to that, this character has been one of the weakest characters from mid to high elo that exists. And there's a couple reasons for that. I do understand that, like, you know, your favorite streamer might be popping off on this character. And I do understand that he has really high skill expression. But here's the difference between someone like Hulk that also has high skill expression and someone like Spider-Man. When you don't have any skill, you're getting no value on either of these characters, right? When you got a lot of skill, you're getting a lot of value on these characters to a certain point. And if you get further skill, you get more value. But Hulk his limit is just, like, you know, 3, 4, 5 times higher than Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man gets capped out. No matter how good you are at a certain point, you're having a really hard time. And it's because you're really submitting yourself to a lot of risk when you go for a lot of these plays. Like, the time that you're flying in to the time that you're engaging, it's too long, and your combos take too long most of the time to where you need a lot of things to go right for you. You need to be able to slip in, you need to be able to kill, you need to be able to get out, and there's a lot of windows where you could just get fucked up. There's a lot of windows where your combo could get canceled. And it's not like a character like Black Panther, which I think just hits far faster and far harder than Spider-Man with less risk than Spider-Man does. And there are some tricky things that you can do with gripping people off things and whatever, but it's not really enough to justify this character seeing a substantial play. And then also, while he does have some synergies with, you know, Squirrel Girl and some other characters, it's not enough to justify his play. I mean, the Spider-Man Venom synergy is like all right, but even with the synergy, it doesn't do enough to him to push him over the edge versus, like, I don't know, the Panther synergy being something that just fundamentally busts, like, makes the character almost busted in some situations, where I would say with the synergy, Panther might even be A tier because that's how strong he is. Spider-Man, it doesn't really change his tier. So it's interesting because I do understand that, like, Spider-Man could just take over lobbies, but I honestly think that this character could have a buff in some way that ideally buffs him for a higher elo play, but isn't something that buffs him in a way that has him dominating the lower elos of play. But that's not, you know, buff and nerf conversation. We're going to save that for a different video, but it is something to think about. Spider-Man is just kind of similar to Iron Fist, where he loses to players once they get better because he doesn't fit into, you know, how you need to engage. There's too many windows to interrupt him. So yeah, C tier for sure. Squirrel Girl, and this is the character that you might be like, wow, he's gonna place him so low. Nope, I'm gonna place this character high. I think she's stronger than Punisher. This character is insane, and you might be like, Mills, what the hell? How did a character that was so bad become so good? And it has to do with their freaking ultimate. I'm telling you, ults matter. Her ultimate is like 10 times better now than it was last season. Because it turns out, even if it's easier to destroy, yes, you could destroy a Squirrel Girl ultimate. If it hits like a corner and bounces into nowhere land, and like that happens a majority of the time, it's not a good ultimate. But now it's gonna just keep ricocheting, and just killing people. And the thing about Squirrel Girl ult that makes it so strong, there's two things. Number one, Squirrel Girl and Squirrel Girl ult really works very well into like a lot of the meta that's being played, where it's just like, you know, this dirty trading of damage, right? Two teams have two frontline tanks. They're just sitting there. Everyone's just trading damage. Squirrel Girl trades a lot of freaking damage and can get a lot of value that way and a lot of kills. Number two, with her ultimate, she generates her ultimate under a lot of supports. So you can generate an ultimate before a support gets a defensive ultimate because you're generating it faster. And support ultimates generate so fast, but she's generating it faster. And in addition to that, if they get it at the same time, it's an ultimate that can demand a support to pop an ultimate in response. So it's an ultimate that, you know, maybe it's not as objectively powerful as like some of these other S tier characters' ultimates, but when it comes to being something that generates so quickly and can just, you know, still get the same amount of trades or even win the fight for your team, that's amazing. So Squirrel Girl, it's just as simple as that, where you buff the ultimate on this character and this character becomes way better. Just like if you buffed Mr. Fantastic ultimate, he would be way better. Ultimates matter. Ultimates really matter. And Squirrel Girl's being way better makes her a lot better. Bucky is the character I main. He got massive buffs. He got health buffs. He got a lot of buffs. Damage buff. There's a lot he got. But still, the more I play this character, unfortunately, I don't think that he stacks up with a lot of the best characters in the game. Now, he's still good. He's still good, but he's not great. And I'm actually going to put him in B. And as someone that plays Bucky a lot, I can tell you some of the reasons why this character doesn't really shine in the way that you think he would. So, once again, he's not going to be a character that has hypermobility, right? So you can't play weird angles. You can't play, you know, really far away from your team because you'll just get pushed and killed, right? You don't have the same mobility options as some of these other characters. And when you're with your team just trading damage, you don't do that really that great either right now. Because you're having a hard time contesting characters like Iron Man and Storm. They're really, really far away. You have a projectile that is, you know, it's a slow rate of fire, so it's hard to hit these characters when they're playing really far. And you want to ground them with, you know, your E, the cone that will ground flyers. But then tanks will zone you away. And if you grip, you know, tanks like Magneto and Strange in particular, you're almost never generating a kill off that. And in a lot of cases, you could just die. So you're good at denying, flankers, but flankers don't have to play into you. Like, almost all your kills come from people making a fundamental mistake. And that's why Winter Soldier is a great character to play in ranked. If you could dominate low, mid, even some high elo games with Winter Soldier, because people are making mistakes all the time and you're punishing that. But as people play more optimized, people play more correct, Winter Soldier starts to fall off hard because there's not these gaping holes for you to exploit. There's not a Star-Lord flying into your back line that you could just hook and kill. There's not a PSYLOCKE playing close range to you. They're playing distance. They're poking. They're playing for their ultimate. And you might be saying like, but Mills, what about Winter Soldier's ultimate? Isn't it an amazing ultimate? It's actually a lot different than some of these other ultimates because it's not really a checkmate ultimate. It's an ultimate that has the highest carry potential, but it's also an ultimate that has the potential to do nothing. And especially against a lot of these triple support compositions, it's going to do nothing. You try to go in, you slam, they're going to pocket each other, the tanks are going to get in the way, you're not going to do anything. You have to be very specific about where you go in, and it can get shut down. So I think this character is going to be a character that is like a ranked all-star super stomper for a lot of ranks. But at the highest elos of play, when people are starting getting better at the top 1%, the situations where he's really going to shine in, they don't exist in the same way. However, as far as like the chaotic ranked things, he's good in any like isolated 1v1 against DPS too. So there are moments where he can outplay people, and there is a lot of carry potential in this character if you could outplay people. He's also good against Groot, Venom, Bucky to an extent, Thor, and PENI. It's just unfortunate that he's really bad against Strange and Magneto, or he doesn't really have a lot of game against these tanks. So you're not going to get a lot of hook value. So yeah, B tier for sure. Now the last DPS, but certainly not the least on the list, we have Wolverine. And just did a Wolverine guide. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if it's out by the time this video's out, but we did a Wolverine guide with Team Captain. He's convinced this character's S tier. I'm inclined to agree in a sense, but for mid to high elo, I would say that he is a strong A tier. And there's a couple of things about Wolverine that is warping about this character. He deletes tanks for one, and you need tanks. Tanks are actually the most important individual characters on a team, and being able to delete tanks is really freaking strong. And that's why this character is a character that will probably be banned a lot, especially from tank players at the highest levels of play. They're going to shut this guy down by banning him. And yeah, Groots have a very hard time dealing with him. Even Stranges do. Magneto probably has some of the best gameplay against him. But yeah, I mean, even those characters could get punished really heavily. The thing about Wolverine is that he's just bad against squishies. So he's not going to be the best character at shutting down some of these carry, DPS. There's a carry DPS on the enemy team. You don't really have a game plan to shut that down that much. You can do a couple of things here and there. We talked about in the guide, but it's not like you're going to be able to directly shut down a Storm all the time. You're not going to be able to directly shut down a Star-Lord all the time. And Namor with the synergy is still a nightmare for you to deal with. That slowing freaking sentry, the slowing squid, you can't kill it yourself. You need your team to. It's going to mess up a lot of your engages. So Wolverine is a character that is warping, and he's very strong. He just doesn't always stack up against a lot of the other, DPS, but he's really good at abusing a lot of the tanks. It's just kind of unfortunate that the tanks do have some gameplay against him, but a really good Wolverine is so warping that, they could just stomp on everybody. But that's true with a lot of characters. A lot of characters, if the player is just good enough, people are just going to ban you. If you're really, really good at Storm, you're really, really good at Star, really, really good at HELA, really, really good at Namor, they're going to ban you. They're just going to ban you outright. I also think, like, in general, if you're a DPS player, you need to be flexible more this season than any other season, because if you're dominant on Wolverine, I think you need another character that you can play. But another suggestion from Team Captain is, if you're a tank player, learn Wolverine as something that you can swap to. He's actually really easy to understand from a tank player's perspective. You know the pain points here, and if you're a tank player, he's probably one of the easiest DPS that you could learn and perform on. So yeah, I think overall he's really good. In mid elo, he does suffer, or he can suffer, because there's no synergy. You pull someone into your team, they might not focus it, whatever. But yeah, he's just, displacement in general is so powerful, and unlike the displacement that Bucky provides, right? That is like more of a skill shot, hard to hit, can't hit everyone. Wolverine displaces, if you do it right, it's almost impossible to stop, and he displaces a lot further, so the kill is a lot more likely. So yeah. Okay, now we're going to talk about supports. Last but not least, supports in this meta. And yeah, there's a lot of really strong supports. Supports are really strong. Triple support is really strong, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about Mantis first, because still, Mantis is one of the best, if not the best support in the game. Just support ult that's really, really powerful. Consistent damage output, can increase the damage of a lot of characters, whether they're going to make a play or an ult or whatever, and has good synergy with WARLOCK. Like, there's a lot going for this character, and she's really strong. She's going to get target banned and nerfed a lot of the times, or she should be more, and I do understand she got a nerf going into Season 1. While I wouldn't have nerfed her that way, I don't like nerfing mobility. It doesn't really fundamentally move this character as far as her placement is concerned. She's just very, very good. Can easily carry games. You can carry games hard from this role, and yeah, I mean, she's nuts. She's just really, really nuts. Her crowd control is really good. Her sleeps, you know, it's really easy to hit that. It's good to punish a lot of characters. Mantis is great. Mantis is just really, really great, and she's definitely almost always should be played in triple support. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't necessarily play her. And yeah, there's a lot of combinations though of supports, a lot of powerful supports. So there's kind of a situation where all the supports are too good. None of them are really bad, except for maybe one we'll talk about in a second. But all of them are good. So yeah, S tier. Invisible Woman. Now, Invisible Woman. Now, this character is crazy strong. Ultimate, really, really good. Defensive ultimate that also denies line of sight. Her push and pull mechanic is fantastic, no pun intended, because you can stop Hulks, you can completely stop Wolverines, pulling people, you know, pulling a grip out of their hands, and that's actually one of the biggest counters to Wolverine right now, is just completely shut him down. Not to mention your ability, your Vortex ability. If that hits a flyer, if it hits an Iron Man, if it hits a Storm, it grounds them and keeps crowd controlling them in, so they're really easy targets. It also prevents Wolverine from being able to leap. Super strong. Like, has cool interactions with a lot of characters, and she's just insanely strong. Some of the problems with her, though, she doesn't have really long distance healing. So there's some compositions she can't play in. She's not going to be great in an all-in dive composition. She's going to be better when your team is playing a certain front line, but there are going to be, you know, situations where you have like a Hulk jumping in, you have people being aggressive. She doesn't really, you know, create any opportunity there. Not like a Mantis would, not like a Warlock could. You know, she can't contribute to that. She can't really damage that. So it's not saying that she's weak. It's just saying that there are compositions that she's good and bad in. Versus like a character like Mantis, I think is always good. Just you play Mantis. You can play Mantis in any comp. Doesn't matter. She's freaking strong. Invisible Woman is strong in most comps, but not all. I think she is so strong, though, that she deserves an A tier placement. So I'm going to put her there respectively. Now, Luna, on the other hand, is a character that can be played in every composition, and I'm putting her in the S tier, not above or behind Mantis. She's just good. She's just so good. Her ultimate is very powerful, and we're seeing, you know, a combination of her, you know, being chained into another support ult, into another support ult. 12 seconds. I can't believe they didn't nerf the duration. I'm not going to go too into that, but yeah, it's crazy. 12 seconds is a long-ass time. And the synergy with Namor is just nuts. It's absurd. So this character also brings synergy to one of the best characters in the game, and is also just one of the best characters in the game in her own right. She allows a lot of flexibility, I think, with two support compositions, because she can kind of handle the main healing responsibilities for a team, where if you have a support that might not heal as much, you know, or doesn't want to prioritize healing as much, someone like WARLOCK and Loki, they can save a lot of their healing for key moments. You know, you don't have to use as many packs on Warlock. You can save a lot of these things for key moments rather than, you know, needing to burn them just to keep your tanks alive. Because Luna can do a lot of that heavy lifting. I mean, Invisible Woman too, but like they just pump out a crazy amount of heals. Luna does that, and she also just has a crazy good form of crowd control. That slow is really good regardless of whether you're playing against dive or not. You could slow frontline, just get free kills. You can slow people on your back line, shut them down. Really, really good. So good ult, a lot of health, a lot of consistent healing. Very, you know, just very powerful just in general. I mean, she's an S tier character, creates great synergy with Namor. Yeah, she's just amazing. There's not much more to say about that. Now, Rocket is a character that just might be secretly busted. I mean, he had one of the highest win rates in ranked play, even in the highest ranks last season, and then he got buffed. And yeah, this character is crazy because last season, you know, Punisher and Winter Soldier had low win rates, but Rocket had high. So people were like, oh, it's because of the synergy, but that doesn't make sense. If he has a high win rate and they have a low, but really, a testament to Rocket is a testament to his BRB, his respawn beacon. Just being able to wipe away people's mistakes, have your teammates go for a risky play and they're back, you know, the team is back. That's a crazy big deal. In addition to that, just his ultimate is deceptively really strong. Like, a lot of people just think, oh, this ultimate's cosmetic. Amplifying damage by that much, remember that his ultimate is being built so quickly, and all the damage that's being amplified is now going to be that much more ultimate charge that you're going to generate. So your team is going to be able to generate another ultimate. And I want to put extra credit here. So we talked about ults, like ults being strong, you know, checkmate ultimates that can just win fights if you don't have a response being strong. But similar to Squirrel Girl, ultimates that generate really fast are also strong, because they're ultimates that just beat the ult economy of everyone else. Like, Rocket's gonna have, like, you know, 5 to 10 more ultimates than other characters in the game, and he gets to use them proactively. So sometimes you're just gonna win fights with them, you know, just win fights outright with them, win free fights with them, use them as the first ultimate in a fight, win that fight, and then the next ultimate, the next fight, yeah, the enemy is gonna start popping all these support ultimates, but you're gonna build another ultimate in that fight, and then you're gonna have it. So, like, it's an ultimate that you get, like, almost at a 2-to-1 ratio, maybe not quite that strong, but you get it so often. And also, it's just really hard to kill this damn rat. Like, he just runs around. He's really hard to kill, this raccoon. Yeah. And now, I think with both Punisher and Winter Soldier buffed, the synergy is very strong. The synergy is very strong at especially punishing tanks in frontline. Just being able to just absolutely rinse a Strange, you know, either force out all of his cooldowns, break his shield, force him back. That's a lot of value. Or just kill people that are out of position. That's crazy value. So, yeah, I think it's hard for me to justify him anyplace else besides A. I mean, the win rate doesn't lie. That's it. The win rate just does not lie on this character. Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and frickin' Dagger. Yeah. I didn't realize how big of a deal having a 4th dash would be. Turns out it's a really big frickin' deal, because right now we're seeing some nonsense, some absolute nonsense in Scrim Pro play and in high rank play, which is just like Cloak ult into Loki copy Cloak ult into Luna ult. Oh, guess what? We got another fucking Cloak ult. You know, it's just like, okay, let's keep stacking these things. Cloak is actually an S tier character. She's crazy strong. She's crazy strong. I think the character has always been strong. I know she didn't have the highest win rate last season. That's why she got buffed. But I think that this character has been more popular than she should have been relative to how good people were playing on her. Like, she's not easy. Or they are not easy. A lot of difficulty here, from the slows to from the blinding to being able to fade everyone out to when you're ulting, how you're ulting. It's not the easiest character in the world, for sure not the easiest character in the world. Has a lot of skill expression in there. There's a big difference between a okay Cloak and an amazing Cloak. But yeah, this character, just very strong ultimate, very consistent healing, a lot of utility, and just utility is king. Just being able to do more than just you know, having a good ultimate. You have a lot more, and you just have so much burst heals as well. Cloak is great. I think Cloak is great, and yeah, it's really kind of a testament to how strong, how stacked the support cast is right now, when someone like Invisible Woman, that's also insane, doesn't quite crack the top because there's just too many. I mean, I can't put everyone in S tier. And yeah, they're all great. They're all great. I think all A and S tier supports are just so freaking strong. But yeah, we got to talk about Jeff. There's Jeff. I'm putting Jeff all the way in the C tier. That might not be fair. He's still a support. We'll put him in the B tier. Yeah, Jeff is Jeff. I mean, his ultimate is good. It's a lot easier to counter now. There's a lot more ways to deal with it. People are a lot better at dealing with it. He does output quite a bit of healing. You know, he did get a slight buff. I mean, he just doesn't provide enough utility compared to any other support options. So if I was talking about like the high ELA, like the highest ELAs to play, like top 1% plus, or like even higher than that, like one for all lobbies, he's like fucking D tier, or maybe C or D. But like from mid to high, I could justify B, because he's hard to kill. And if you're a support that is just dying over and over again, it's better to live as anything than to die as something good. That sounds like an inspirational quote, but it's serious. Like it's better to live as Shark, a character that I don't think brings as much value, than die over and over again as Mantis, die over and over again as Adam. Like, these characters are going to bring a lot more utility and value overall, but if you're dying on them, it doesn't matter. So there is a place for him. And his ultimate is powerful, especially, you know, it's an anti-support support ult, which is cool. But yeah, he definitely lags behind in a lot of other ways. Loki. I'm putting Loki. I think I'm putting Loki right here. Loki's great. He's great. His totems, people are kind of realizing just how busted these totems are. They're better than support ults in a lot of ways because you just live. Like, you know, Magneto ult, you throw it on someone's head when it's maxed. It's going to kill you. Doesn't matter what support ult you're using, but it doesn't kill you through Loki totem. So like Loki totem transferring damage into heals, crazy. Loki has a very high carry potential, in my opinion, just being able to completely shut down plays, being flexible, like being able to know, I need this defensive ultimate to prolong this fight, or hey, their defenses are down. I'm going to copy my Storm's ult and checkmate them. My Storm used their ult to try to wipe. They defensive ulted. Well, guess what? I'm going to copy my Storm, and now I'm going to wipe. Or they have another ultimate to shut us down. We don't have anything for it. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to shut it down. Like, you have so many options. You're so flexible, and a good Loki player can just be like this freaking, I don't know, strategist, okay, to just min-max the whole fight. The only thing I would say about Loki is I think he is better as a in a 3 support composition instead of a 2 support composition. It's better if he gets more flexibility to do what he wants to do. And I really like, you know, compositions that are like, you know, like Adam, Loki, and like a Cloak and Dagger, because you potentially have 2 teleport or two invulnerability, like the copy. You can Cloak and Dagger plus copy. You have Adam Warlock and Loki just generating a lot of offensive capabilities. But there's so many different combinations. Like, there's a lot of combinations. And I talked about Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is definitely in this conversation. I'm going to put him at the very top of A, actually. Because while he doesn't have, like, raw, consistent healing, Soul Bond is one of the best abilities in the game. Allowing your team to be really proactive and not die for it. Being able to burst heal people up is super, super strong. Like, just that level of burst healing, chain burst healing, very, very strong. Resurrects are just always going to be very busted. From BRB, from Rocket, to being able to res your whole team. Now, I would be careful here. There are things that could shut down your res. So it's typically a good idea to resurrect when one person dies or like right before a person dies. Like, you're not resurrecting your entire team, bringing them back up at half HP, and then getting freaking Thor ulted. Like, that's not what you want. So yeah. And another thing about Warlock is you're outputting so much raw damage that you can just win fights for your team because you're out producing them. Like, the enemy team is like producing a certain amount of damage, and your team is producing way more damage because Adam Warlock is contributing, and it just creates a lot of breakpoints. You know, multiple people are shooting at the same thing, things die. There's a lot more pressure on the enemy team, so they require a lot more heals. They get on the back foot. And so even though Adam Warlock doesn't have as much consistent healing, he could put opponents on the back foot where they feel like they need to just heal and keep their team alive more than you do, and you actually feel like you need to heal less because your team is always the one applying pressure. So yeah, that's really where Adam Warlock really shines, not to mention his synergy between Mantis and Star-Lord. I actually think Mantis, Star-Lord, and Adam Warlock is probably like a top 2, you know, trinergy that you could play this season. Maybe the only one better than that is the Loki, HELA, Thor. Being able to kill one person, bring 2 people back alive, pretty freaking busted. But there's a lot of really powerful synergies. We'll have a video talking about duos and trios that you can play as well on this channel, so definitely smash that subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.